Preventing a war is really hard because the timing is very short, and you make it costly, which is important. I mean, even if it doesn't stop, it's important for the war to be costly, because to try maybe stop the next one. You know, as compared with the Vietnam War movement, it's just incomparably ahead now. I mean, people talk about the Vietnam War movement, but they forget or don't know what it actually was like. I mean, the war in Vietnam started in 1962, publicly, you know. That was the public attack on South Vietnam, Air Force, you know, chemical warfare, concentration camps, whole business. No protest. You know, protest didn't build up for years, 4 or 5 years. And the protest that did build up 4 or 5 years later was mostly about the bombing of the North, which was it was, you know, terrible, but a sideshow. The main attack was against South Vietnam, and there was never any serious protest against that. This time, there's protests before the war even got started. I don't think, I've been asking people to think of something, but I can't think of an example in the entire history of Europe, including the United States, when there was ever protest before the war of any substantial level. You know, people have pointed out there was a little protest before Suez, but you know, nothing. It was a small war. Now here you got massive protest before a war even started out, and it's a tremendous, you know, kind of it's a tribute to the changes in popular culture that have taken place in the Western countries in the last 30 or 40 years. It's just novel. Actually, the same was true in the 80s. The solidarity movements in the 1980s were totally new in the entire history of European imperialism. These were coming from Middle America, you know, church groups in the Midwest and stuff like that. And there were tens of thousands of people who went to live with the victims, to help them and to try to protect them. And a lot of them are still there, you know, Witnesses for Peace and group like that. Now they're all over the world, you know, they're in the occupied territories and so on. That's never happened before. I mean, the whole history of European imperialism, or the Vietnam War, say, or anything, nobody ever dreamed of going to live with the victims. You know, it's not the kind of thing you did. You protested in the streets of the North or something if you did anything. I mean, that's completely new, you know, and very important. Didn't get any coverage, but that's because it wasn't in elite sectors. Like, it wasn't students in rich universities. It was people from rural churches and stuff like that. Actually, a lot of them evangelical Christians. You know, so it's not a right-left issue. I mean, Witnesses for Peace, which is probably the most important, comes from evangelical Christian circles. Same guys who produce Billy Graham and Jerry Falwell. You know. And so it's a kind of a, you know, the United States is a funny country. It has no politics, just, you know, no right or left or anything like that. But this was just the effects of the change in popular consciousness.
We found in Britain that probably the majority of people are against the war, according to opinion polls, and they do the same thing here, saying Saddam Hussein's going to attack you in Leicestershire or something.
Yeah.
But I was wondering what you thought about that. In a way, they need the doves. You know, they say we respect your idea, your view that you're against the war, and that's respected and so on. But as soon as you sort of break out of quite narrow, like a march every 6 months maybe, if you break out of that and actually do anything, you get attacked. I live in Brighton, a seaside town, where teenagers were pepper sprayed and battened for just sitting down in a street, and that's considered beyond the pale. Now, do you think that there's a bit of a tightening there? What do you think of those sort of actions?
Well, the more protest there is, the more tightening there's going to be. You know, that's routine. I mean, when the Vietnam War protest really began to build up, so did the repression. You know, COINTELPRO, which isn't much studied, was far more serious than Watergate, incomparably worse. And it was, you know, it was going on before, but it built up by that time. You know, I was very close to a long jail sentence myself, just stopped by the Tet Offensive. They called off the trials. After the Tet Offensive, the establishment turned against the war, and they called off the trials that were going on. But, and you know, right now, I mean, a lot of people could end up in Guantanamo, I mean, if there's real protest. And people are aware of it. Okay. But you know, these are all, the question in all of these things is how much popular resistance is there going to be? If there's a lot of...
What do you mean by popular resistance?
Pardon?
What do you mean by popular
anything from, writing a letter to your representative to, or organizing resistance among soldiers, whatever it is. If there's protest in a country, there's going to be repression. Okay, it's like reflex. Can they get away with it? Well, it depends a lot on the reaction. I mean, take, say, the United States. In the early 50s, there was what was called repression, McCarthyism. But the only reason it succeeded is because there was no resistance to it. When they tried the same thing in the 60s, it instantly collapsed because people simply, laughed at it. And they couldn't do it. These countries, I mean, even a dictatorship can't do anything at once. It's got to have some degree of popular complacence. And in a more democratic country, it's a very fragile power system. If there's sufficient resistance and opposition, they can't do it.